The morning after Allison spoke David's name aloud, something shifted. Not everything, she didn't wake up healed, or free from grief. The ache was still there, steady as a heartbeat. But it was different now, less like a wound and more like a scar she could finally touch without flinching. She made coffee slowly, savoring the smell, and set out her notebook on the table. For months, the empty chair across from her had been unbearable, a reminder of absence. That morning, she didn't stare at it as long. Instead, she opened her notebook and wrote. When we speak their names, they live again, not in the way we lost them, but in the way we remember. Saying his name didn't break me. It let me breathe. The words flowed more easily than they had in months. She didn't stop after one page. She kept writing, pouring out fragments of memory and fragments of now. How the cold air stung her lungs on morning runs, how Cooper's paws left tracks in the snow, how Daniel's quiet patience felt like standing in sunlight after too long in the dark. When she finally set the pen down, her hand cramped, her chest felt strangely light. In the days that followed, she saw Daniel more often. Sometimes by chance, sometimes by choice. They walked Cooper through the common at dusk, the city glowing with strings of lights still hanging from the holidays. They lingered in cafes where their mugs grew cold while conversation stretched. One evening, as they sat near the river, Daniel asked gently, "Do you write every day?" "Almost. Even if it's just a line." He nodded. "That takes discipline. I can barely get my students to finish 2 paragraphs." She smiled faintly. "It's not discipline. It's survival." Daniel didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Maybe survival and discipline are closer than we think." The thought stayed with her long after. That night, she wrote it in her notebook like a seed to revisit later. By early March, the snow began to melt. Slush clogged the gutters, and the first brave shoots of green pushed up through patches of frozen ground. Allison felt herself thawing too. One Saturday, she joined Daniel at a bookstore downtown, an old brick building with creaking floors and the smell of paper thick in the air. She had avoided bookstores since David left, they had been their place. Walking in now was like stepping into a room filled with ghosts. But Daniel didn't rush her. He let her wander, let her fingertips trail along spines of books, let her stand frozen in front of the fiction shelves until she could breathe again. Finally, she picked up a novel she had once wanted to read but never had. She turned it over in her hands like an artifact. "Good choice?" Daniel asked, tilting his head. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But maybe it's time to find out." They left with their purchases tucked under their arms, Cooper trotting happily ahead. The weight of the book in her bag felt like a small promise to herself. That night, she opened the new book but found herself writing instead. Words poured out, not just about grief, but about survival, memory, resilience. Pages filled with reflections that surprised even her. When she paused, she realized she had written almost an essay, something that could stand alone, beyond her private notebooks. She reread it aloud, testing the sound of her own voice in the quiet apartment. The words carried differently when spoken, as if asking to be heard by more than just her. The idea startled her, what if I shared this? Fear came immediately after. What if people didn't understand? What if they judged? What if putting her pain into the world stripped it bare again? But the thought wouldn't leave. Maybe healing wasn't just about holding grief quietly. Maybe it was also about daring to let it echo. A week later, Allison mentioned it to Daniel. They sat in the cafe where they'd first shared coffee, mugs steaming between them. "I've been writing more seriously," she admitted, twisting her hands in her lap. "I think I might submit something. An essay, maybe. To a magazine or a journal. I don't know." Daniel's eyes lit with quiet pride. "You absolutely should. You don't even know if it's good." "I don't have to. If it's yours, if it's true, it matters." His certainty steadied her more than she expected. That evening, she polished her essay, hands trembling over the keyboard. She sent it to a small online journal she'd once admired but never dreamed of approaching. The confirmation email pinged back instantly, impersonal and automatic. Still, she sat staring at the screen, heart hammering. She had done it. She had stepped out of silence. The waiting was hard. Each day that passed without a reply felt like proof she'd made a mistake. But life didn't pause for her anxiety. She kept running, kept meeting Daniel, kept filling her notebooks. And then, 2 weeks later, the email came. "We loved your piece. We'd be honored to publish it in our next issue." Allison reread the words until they blurred. She pressed a hand to her mouth, laughter and tears colliding. Her first instinct was to call David, old muscle memory. The ache of that realization stung. But then she picked up her phone and called Claire. Her sister screamed with delight so loudly Allison had to hold the phone away. "Al, that's incredible. I told you, you have a voice people need to hear." For the first time, Allison believed it. The night her essay went live, Daniel insisted they celebrate. He showed up with a bottle of wine and Cooper bounding at his heels. They ate takeout on her living room floor, the glow of her laptop screen casting light as they read her words together. When she finished, silence lingered. Daniel finally looked at her, eyes steady. "That was beautiful, Allison." Not because it was polished. Because it was honest. Her cheeks flushed, but her chest swelled with something stronger than embarrassment. Pride. She realized then that grief had given her not only sorrow but also language. And sharing that language didn't diminish her love for David. It expanded it, turned it into something that could touch others. Later, when the apartment was quiet and the city hummed outside, Allison wrote in her notebook. "The past is part of me, but it is not all of me. Speaking his name did not chain me to him. It freed me to live fully, with him folded into the fabric of who I am. And living fully means opening doors, not closing them." She closed the notebook and felt a quiet certainty settle inside her. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like an empty corridor. It felt like a house full of windows, and one by one, she was learning how to open them.